Is it? Yeah, okay. I had a question for Valeria about the institution and the market and collectors, I suppose, in Bolivia.
Yes, the relation
sort of,
between them.
Yeah, maybe if you could kind of give us a picture of that situation in Bolivia.
It's kind of hard to say there is an art market in Bolivia nowadays. I just heard last week that a couple of galleries were closing, like two of the three most important galleries in La Paz were closing. A lot of this more traditional art is not being consumed, and also I think that Bolivian art hardly exists outside of Bolivia in terms of the market. So usually institutions are not looking at the market. I mean, especially government institutions. So we are free in that way.
Free but invisible.
Free but invisible.
Pero yo creo que es importante darse cuenta que cada contexto tiene una forma particular y un desarrollo diferente. Entonces yo creo que en Latinoamérica ha sido muy importante cómo los artistas se han organizado a partir de proyectos de residencias, de espacios independientes, y en países como México o como Brasil, sobre todo Brasil, el mercado del arte es muy importante, pero en otros el contexto artístico lo es mucho más. Entonces creo que no se puede comparar porque cada país tiene un desarrollo político, social y económico diferente. Entonces tal vez en Bolivia no es el momento de tener muchas galerías, pero de generar espacios de discusión, de tener un trabajo muy fuerte a partir de las instituciones, de los museos, de las universidades, y el mercado del arte ya vendrá en el momento en el que tenga que venir. Y además creo que ahora las galerías son internacionales y es posible que haya artistas bolivianos que están en galerías internacionales porque no hay galerías en Bolivia, pero creo que no se puede comparar cómo funciona el arte en Inglaterra a cómo funciona el arte en Bolivia o en España o en otro país. Son mundos diferentes y creo que eso también es lo interesante con lo que se pierde y con lo que se gana.
Should I translate? Maybe. Yeah, okay. I'll do a quick translation. Summarize because it's important. I wanted to say that I think that each context has its own context. It's quite difficult to compare each context exactly to each other. For example, in countries in Latin America where perhaps the market isn't as developed, the artists have the opportunity to create different things, and institutions can organize projects such as residencies, which might not be as strong in countries where the market's more developed. So, for example, we can talk about the markets in Brazil and Mexico and certain Latin American countries, but in countries such as Bolivia, perhaps where the market's not as strong, you can do things that might not be possible to do in Brazil and Mexico. So I think that we can't really compare those contexts exactly. And Bolivia, perhaps there's no market now, but there might be a space in the future and the market might develop and that will change the context again. I also want to mention the point that there are also Bolivian artists, even if they're not represented in Bolivian galleries, they're represented in international galleries. So that's another point that's important to consider. So, and just to finish, that this idea that you can't compare exactly the context, and in a way it's a dialogue of kind of losing and gaining, and that fits each context differently.
I think it's very interesting that you should mention context, and I was wondering whether each of you might like to comment on whether you think there's any kind of continuous principles that might be useful for curating Latin American art, collecting Latin American art, or indeed any other kinds of art. For example, Muzak has a very developed program of research from which it develops its activities, and whether that might be a principle with which to think about collecting and collections. And perhaps Valeria mentioned this idea of reflexive curating and double interpretations, and whether this kind of very overt way of dealing with museum collections and creating conflicting narratives might be something which could be a continuous approach. Anyone?
Who would like to go first?
Anyone can.
Bueno, a ver, el programa de adquisiciones del MUSAC, nosotros tenemos bueno, la primera cuestión es que la colección empieza en 1989. Esa es la fecha que se fijó con Agustín Pérez Rubio, con el comité, Rafael Doctor, decidieron que se iba a comprar a partir del 89 porque es una fecha muy importante para la historia del mundo contemporáneo. Cae el muro de Berlín, bueno, hay muchas...
No, la pregunta era también los objetivos del museo.
Entonces,
como investigación, cómo contribuye a la colección.
Okay. Entonces, bueno, la idea, hay esa fecha que determina un poco desde qué momento se empieza a comprar y qué artistas se empiezan a comprar. Es una colección realmente de arte contemporáneo. Y por otra parte hay un comité de adquisiciones que se reúne, que presenta sus proyectos y que esos proyectos corresponden a la idea que tiene el director del museo de cómo quiere que la colección avance. Aparte de eso tenemos nuestra programación, que también obviamente tiene que ver, está relacionada con el proyecto del director y del curador jefe. De manera que todos esos elementos hacen que tengamos una idea muy concreta y muy coherente de lo que queremos comprar y de cómo la colección va creciendo poco a poco. Les contaba hace un momento en una discusión informal que al principio el museo tenía un presupuesto muy importante de adquisiciones. La economía ha cambiado, ahora el presupuesto se ha reducido bastante, pero eso nos ha permitido analizar la colección, ver qué huecos tenemos, qué vacíos hay en la colección, qué debemos comprar, qué no hemos debido comprar. Es un momento muy importante de análisis, un momento muy importante de poder investigar también, de darnos el tiempo de ver hacia dónde queremos seguir con la colección y de qué forma la colección, que es una colección que no está expuesta en permanencia, solo la mostramos cada 2 años, hacemos una exposición temática sobre la exposición, o es una exposición que viaja. El año pasado estuvo en Guadalajara en la Feria Internacional del Libro con una exposición que tenía que ver con la palabra, se llamaba La Fuerza de la Palabra, y una vez al año la colección viaja más. Hay obras que se han mostrado mucho más fuera del museo que en el museo mismo, y creo que eso es muy importante porque es una manera también de que el museo esté presente en otros contextos.
Okay, so just to summarize the different ways that we collect. There's the Committee of Acquisitions. They contribute to the projects and how the different collecting projects advance, and that works together with the curatorial project of the museum. And both really work together to decide how we collect. The proposal of the museum, as I was saying, has been changing, and in this economic climate and with less money, then it's an exciting and kind of there's an opportunity there because it's a chance to look at really what stands out in the collection, what's missing from the collection, a chance to research more the collection, and so it's a really important time for the museum. In addition, our collection is only exhibited every 2 years in a major exhibition of works from the collection. And yeah, so the structure of the exhibitions is also important in terms of showing what the collection offers.
David?
Well, I suppose in my presentation I was expressing some generalities of quite a high order. I wasn't attempting to get into the detailed business of how precisely collections might or might not be built. And I think one has to acknowledge that any collecting activity has inescapably some kind of ideological bias. It's impossible to collect in a completely sort of neutral way. all I would say is that the public, even the relatively well-informed art world of Britain, certainly, is currently very, very little exposed to art, even from some of the major producing countries in South America and Latin America. And steps, it seems to me, need to be taken to widen the knowledge that we have of what is being done and what has been done in Latin America in terms of producing the visual arts. I suppose if there's one principle that I instinctively feel is extremely important, it is that that process of exploration, and indeed any subsequent exhibiting and collecting, should be based on strong collaborative relationships with artists, dealers, critics and others in, if I can put it this way, the producing countries. I am uncomfortable with the notion of the Western curator descending like a predator and simply picking up things that he or she may find interesting, like a magpie. That seems to me to be probably wrong and probably in the end likely to mislead. So I think my instinct is that the process should be as collaborative as possible, and should, if it's possible, it should be even-handed. There should be the rich countries, if I can put it that way, should not be the dominant partners in the relationship. I'm not quite sure how that can be managed.
Nobody's quite sure. Tate's model of collecting in Latin America is that they have an associate curator who's based in Latin America. We've had two. The first was Cuauhtémoc Medina, and the person who is in post at the moment is Julieta Gonzalez. And so they have brought different approaches by their sort of very nature of being from different countries and with different research interests. And I think that can be quite a good model, so that it's not UK-based curator.
May I just add another point? Looking at Africa, the Triangle Arts Trust, I think, is a very interesting experiment which has been going on for 30-odd years, I think, which involves actually bringing together artists from, say, Britain and artists working in West Africa particularly, so that they can share knowledge, share experience, and sometimes work collaboratively. And I think that's an interesting model that's worth perhaps exploring and using more widely.
Do we have any more questions from the floor? No. Would you like to respond to that, Valeria? Would you like to respond to the question as well?
It was, well, I was proposing interpretation because I think, well, it's pretty much related with the issues of authority that the museum and the curator exert. And having been a curator and working in a museum, I'm aware of that, and I'm aware that now many artists are working and doing institutional critique, but I think it's also very important for the museum to do that as well. And I think in the case of Bolivia, it's important to think about also what's going on in the context, and I mean important political changes, and basically what I was proposing, I mean, it's an idea, of course. It was making visible the curatorial script and the power of the museum, but I think this is important, and I think this is important in the project of the museum itself. And this could affect, of course, the acquisitions policies and the curating and the research and thinking about what art is or its function today in society.
I think it's interesting thinking about your presentation, Valeria, that the sort of the narrative that David has presented us with is very much kind of is on a global level, but we also have to bear in mind that there are lots of levels of political exclusion and inclusion taking place. So it's not just a matter of accepting artists from Latin America, but just as much as thinking about stylistically what's going on, how global ideas about the international contemporary art kind of world and stylistic hegemony is going to, and homogenization affects things. So there's so much more at play than a kind of us and them. But unfortunately, I don't think we've got time to go further. I really wanted to pick up on what María and Inés said about new structures of thinking, and I think that was a really nice point to make in terms of, I mentioned at the beginning that by the very nature of collecting, you're sort of compounding a history and compounding a narrative. And so this idea of trying to create new structures of thought, new patterns of collecting, perhaps micro collections within a collection or something, allowing the development of different paths within collections could be a kind of possibility or something. But I'm afraid we're going to have to finish. So, well, thanks very much for all your attention. Thank you to all of the speakers for their wonderful presentations. And could I just alert you, we're going to have a book launch for Nick Bonilla's book, which is going to be launched right here, right now. And it's called Eduardo Ramírez Villamizar, Geometría y Abstracción. And it's being published by Ediciones Gamma in Bogotá. Okay.
Can I just stop you there quickly? Just before we go on to Nico, we just wanted to say a quick thank you to Mauro Helitzka for supporting this public programme. We're so glad that so many of you attended and across the 2 days, and we just wanted to say it wouldn't be able to finish really without a quick note to Mauro. So,
I suppose one really needs to think of the collections themselves as works of art.
Oh wow. This is a performance. Well, some gross out.
yeah,
Well, I want to thank you very much for the University of Essex, Miriam, Isobel, and Joanne for helping us for the second year, all the auditorium, all the organization for Pinta Art Fair, the two big programs. The Museum Acquisition Program helps museums to buy Latin American art for their collections, and the auditorium helped and organized by the University of Essex is a main or part of the fair that helps about knowledge and diffusion of Latin American art. Thank you very much to all the participants and organizers and all the people who assist to our auditorium. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say we're finished. We're not finished. Now Nico's going to come up, so.
The book Ramírez Villamizar, Geometría y Abstracción, on the Colombian modern artist Eduardo Ramírez Villamizar. This book was launched at the beginning of this year in Bogota, and as I've been living here, I haven't had the chance to be there. So I want to thank Joe and Miriam and the whole Pinta organizers for giving me the chance to show my book to you today. So first of all, I have to say that after the talks and after discussions that I heard, that we all heard today, I kind of feel that I'm here to perpetuate the hegemonic power of modernism and geometric abstraction in Latin America, which I think is fine. Well, they still have a lot of things to say, and we should go back always and look at them in different ways. Well, an example of that is this picture of Ramírez Villamizar in '55 being so like a proper modern artist with his cubist self-portrait in the back. One of the rich guys, as David might say. So I'm gonna go through all his artworks, basically in 5 minutes I'm gonna go through 50 years of artworks, like to show why it was important for us to make a book about this artist and why we thought it was worth it to look at him again and do this big publication with new photographs and a new approach. So everything that I'm gonna say here is based on a text, the main text of the book that was written by Ana María Franco. Ana María is doing a PhD in NYU University, and she's writing on Ramírez Villamizar and Edgar Negret. So all the relationships that I'm gonna show you here and the look is all based on her text and on her research. So basically, Ramírez Villamizar was born in a small town in the north of Colombia. He went to Bogota, the capital, in the late 40s and started doing this kind of exercises. He was studying architecture. These paintings were always referred as his expressionist influence or his expressionist exercises. Also, these kind of things that are very influenced by Cubism and by both Picasso and his relationship with Edgar Negret and with Jorge Oteiza, that was the Basque artist that went to Colombia for a couple of years and worked with them, and he showed them books about Picasso and Henry Moore and in the beginning of in 1950, Ramírez Villamizar traveled to Paris, like looking for the dream of any artist to go to Paris at that moment and look for like the European dream. So he encountered abstraction there. He started talking to people and relating to people that were working on abstraction, and he joined the abstract art workshop, which was founded in 1950 by Edgar Pillet and Jean Devan. He started visiting galleries such as the Denis René Gallery or the New Reality Salon, so it was like a whole bunch of people working on geometric abstraction, or as it's referred today as a hard age abstractionism. So he grew up in this environment, and this is one of his early drawings towards abstractionism, but you can still see some figurative tendencies there. So you can see like a bowl or a cup or some fruit. So it was like a small step from figurative works towards abstractionism. So what Ana María Franco does in her text in this book is to relate Ramírez Villamizar with different artworks from abstract artists that were working in Paris at that time. Victor Vasarely was a key figure in this art scene. He was showing in the Denis René Gallery. He was a teacher at the abstract art workshop. So they were very close at that time. In this abstract art workshop, also artists as Earls Kelly was there as a young artist, Jack Jungerman, the Venezuelans Jesus Soto and Alejandro Otero. They all were in the same place at the same time, learning from these guys that they have a bigger tradition in abstract art. So I'm just gonna make these relationships with images so you can see and say about yourself that so this is Vasarely and Ramírez Villamizar on the right. This is Jean Devan and Ramírez Villamizar on the bottom. So that was his first encounter with abstraction. He went back to Colombia in 1958 and he started painting a lot of paintings. He did this one that is quite important in his career because he won the Guggenheim Prize with this one. So it opened a lot of doors for him, and then he decided to go to New York and work there for the whole decade of the 60s. And in New York he started doing this on the bottom right of the screen. These reliefs, like small reliefs of wooden, all of them white. So I guess it was like a small step from 2 dimensions to volume that he encountered in New York, working by the hand of artists as Louis Nevelson or Earls Kelly, that had returned from Paris to New York, and they meet again in New York. So you can see Earls Kelly, Ramírez Villamizar on the bottom. Of course, he was in the 60s in New York, so he encountered the whole minimalist artists and the whole text that they were reading and the whole writing and the whole boom of minimalism in the 60s. So he moved from this very shy reliefs to this more like volume and 3D objects, as the one you can see on the right. So I guess what are we trying to say here, and what Ana María tried to say here, and I'm trying to show here, is that Ramírez Villamizar is very known in Colombia as an important artist and one of the pioneers of abstract art in the country, but he was working with these people in Paris and he was working with these people in New York. So he was not only importing ideas from Europe and New York, but he was actually working with them, like giving out ideas, being very active and participating actively in the development and of the different trends in Paris first and then in New York. This is a couple of photographs that I found that are quite funny. Is the what is Bedford Goodman store in New York in the Fifth Avenue. I guess it was a common practice for the artists of that time to show artworks in this place. So it's kind of interesting to see all these mannequins with these clothes and this is 1968. So he participated with the very important artists from what is called Purism or Classicism in New York. He participated in expositions as Modern Classicism, Purism, and the Classic Spirit of the 20th Century. Also, the MoMA in 1956 bought a couple of his artworks, mainly paintings. He also did this artwork for the Fort Tryon Park in New York, where the collection of medieval art of the Metropolitan Museum is. And a couple of more artworks like around the city. So I guess what I'm trying here to say is that his presence in this place was big. And well, after that, after building these relationships with Ramírez Villamizar and with other international artists, Ana María in this text and other art historians, Colombian art historians, has said that the particularity of Ramírez Villamizar that differentiate his artworks from the traditions from Paris and New York is his interest in pre-Columbian art, and especially in their abstraction and the materials and figures that they used. So this is a key artwork from 1958 when he first returned from Paris. This is in the Banco de Bogotá in Bogotá, of course. It's a relief. It's the first mural abstract done in Colombia. So it was important. It was like a shock for the whole artistic medium in the city, because, well, they haven't seen this before. It's made of golden leaf, referring also not only to traditional pre-Columbian jewelry made of gold, but also to the Baroque altars from the churches in Colombia. He was born in a very traditional city in the north of Colombia, as I said, and it was full of churches. So as a kid, he was completely involved with the Catholicism and visiting these Baroque and full of gold churches. So I guess he brought this interest from in abstract art from Europe and from New York, but also he made slowly introduce his own language and his, I guess, national identities to his artworks. Another two examples of that are this Serpiente Precolombina, 1967, and another late one, Templo Muisca, 1985. So that was like all Ramírez Villamizar in 5 minutes. So basically he went from painting to dimensions, to reliefs, then to little sculptures, and then to these big structures that are around some cities, especially in Bogotá. And this is the way that in common historiography and every author in Colombia and the couple of books that are talking about Ramírez Villamizar have approached to his artwork. So looking at this, we wanted to do a different thing and trying to imagine a new way of showing his work, and we finally got an idea, and that's what I want to show you, how the book that I'm presenting today is. Well, I wanted to read this first. This is related, as is in one interview on Ramírez Villamizar, and he's talking about his interest in pre-Columbian art, so I think it's important for me to read it here. One of my most reiterated and pleasant rituals in the continuous learning process has been the visits to the Golden Museum in Bogota, a privileged place that defies my emotions and feeds my imagination each time with a renewed surprise. As here we don't have a Louvre, we don't have a museum to see the big masters of European art, we do have the Museo del Oro of the Golden Museum. So I go there and stay for hours and hours, and I go out amused and overwhelmed of the creativity of the amazing sense of shape and composition of those remote peoples. Okay, so after that I'm gonna show you how we organize the book and why it's different from this always chronological view of Ramírez Villamizar. Basically what I did is to divide all his artworks by colors. I choose 7 colors that was like they were present in all of his artworks during his whole life, and divided the whole book like that. So this is for example, the yellow section. What I think it was important, and what I think this new way of showing his artworks can bring to us and has been interested is, for example, that with this division of colors we can put a painting that is very early from 1954 in the left, and a sculpture that is from 1983, almost 40 years after. So I guess what I was trying to say that's he always thought about the same ideas. He was always thinking formally the same compositions, and that he was always aware of what he wanted to be, like to show him as a very consistent artist in abstraction. So I'm gonna go through some examples of the book and how is it organized. So this, as I said, is the yellow. This is also included in the yellow section. It's the same. The painting on the left is from 1954, and the sculpture is from 1990. So it's almost also like a 40-year difference, but you can kind of see similarities. I know it's a very formal way of seeing his artwork, but I think that relying on colors is also important, and it also has to do with his experience in New York and with all these approaches of monochrome and how this minimalist and all other artists were working at that time. So it's also related to his life in other countries and especially in New York. This is the second section, which is the blue. These are the whites. Oh, sorry, this is gray, another section that we did. And this is the black section. And this is one that was called like rusted color or something, because at the end, from the late 80s to the end of his life in 2004, he worked with rusted metal. So we compared here very late works with very early works, also in the same idea of the whole book. And these are the reds. Well, so that was basically the book and how it's organized. I hope you can see. There are a couple of books going around, so you can check them. I want to finish at the end of the book We did a whole research on the chronology, and we built a new chronology on Ramírez Villamizar, and it's quite interesting because it's all based on interviews and videos, and so it's almost as he's telling his own story. We only use the quotes from Ramírez Villamizar, so I want to read a couple of them that I found like funny and interesting, because we try to make it more like human at the end, no? Because these pictures and these artworks are always seem to be cold and very geometric, but it was not the case. So, for example, the entry from 1929, when he was still a little kid, is one day at school the teacher gave me clay and said, "Do what you want." So I built a little clay dog with his 4 legs, tails, ears, and long nose, a whole doggy. I was very happy when I finished it. On Saturdays there was no class, but I still used to go to the school, running through the corridors and empty classrooms. Do you know why? To see my little clay dog. At the end of the year they exhibited my dog with all the works of other students. And there it was. I did it. Believe me, that was the most thrilling moment in my whole career as an artist. Or another one that is interesting is from 1950, when he went first to Paris. So it was, Picasso is driving everybody crazy, and I was in Paris. Being in Paris meant to be where Picasso was, where Picasso painted, breath. Some people told me, maybe just to brag, I'm going to introduce you to Picasso. And far from happy, I was terrified. What can I say to him? I didn't see Picasso, but I did meet Brancusi, who traveled all the way from Romania to be in Paris. What a magnificent moment. There I was in front of a man that I knew was a genius. He founded the purism in modern sculpture with a loving and tender use of materials. I remember I was with my hands inside my pockets, carefully listening to him. I was completely absorbed by his presence. Suddenly he turned to me and asked, "And what do you do?" Well, I said, with a shaking voice, "Here, working, trying to be an artist." "Well, with your hands inside your pockets, we will never achieve anything." So I turned red. I felt as some kind of god, or Jehovah himself was cursing me, throwing me out of his kingdom. So yeah, that was like the idea of the chronology, like to be more showing Ramírez Villamizar as a person rather than this cold and geometric abstract artist that is supposed to be. Thank you.
Can I just say a big thank you to Nico? Does anyone have any questions about the book? If there's nothing straight away, you can always get in touch via Twitter or contact Nico. We've got at the University of Essex stand just behind us, we've got a copy of the Ramírez Villamizar book. So please come and take a look and give any feedback as well to Nico. Okay, questions?
Is it on? Yeah. Nico, I was just wondering, especially when I was looking at the rusted sculptures, how far Villamizar was aware of other artists in Latin America who were working in a similar way. And I was just thinking of the sculptures we have at Essex by Amilcar de Castro and Franz Weissmann, for example.
Sure. Well, he started doing these rusted artworks after he made a trip to Machu Picchu and to the Inca ruins in 1983. That sort of changed his whole approach to materials and to sculpture. It was you had to do with the power of time or something like that. He talks about how these ruins, where time was consuming the ruins, trees were growing and they were like going to nature again or something like that. So he claims to do the same thing with leaving the sculptures to rust, as saying that one day they will become dust again and melt with like a very poetic thing of going back to the nature. And of course, he had a very close relationship with different artists through Latin America. And an important thing that I forgot to say was his relationship with, well, not relationship, but his knowledge of Joaquín Torres Garcia. And as we saw in the previous exhibition, on the Pompidou exhibitions, in the previous talk, there was a big retrospective of Torres Garcia in 1955 in Paris. And Ramírez Villamizar that was there, and he talks about it. And this all interested in pre-Columbian art is also, of course, guided by the claim of Torres Garcia that all Latin American artists should be looking at their ancestors or the pre-Columbian artists. So of course he read the Constructive Universalism, the book, and I guess it was a very big thing in Latin America, and a lot of artists that work in the same sense, they are all influenced by Torres Garcia.
And also, if anyone wants to buy a copy of the book, they can speak to Nico as well.